the challenge of sketching things when you have a complicated shape, how do we sketch this thing? I mean, really, if this is what I'm trying to create as a sketch, it's got a lot of curves, it's got a lot of shapes. How do I effectively do it? Well, the least effective way to do it would be to just start somewhere and keep your fingers crossed and hope that the final shape you draw looks something like what you intended on, right? So here I'm just kind of guessing and hoping. I'm not really planning, and when I'm all done, I mean, I got something here that looks sort of like that. I wouldn't say it's an award winner though, you know. It's the basic idea, but it's kind of a shabby sketch. And that's because I really didn't plan anything out. I didn't put a lot of thought into how I was going to get my final shape. You see, it's a very complicated shape. And when you are trying to draw something complicated, it'd be better to start off with some simple shapes. So, just like in CAD, when we want to draw something that's complicated, start off simple. Right? So, if you looked at this thing, the basic shape of this, you know, more or less, I mean, it's kind of rectangular. Maybe it looks like an L, you know, but really, I can see going over to the wood pile or to the metal pile in the welding shop and finding a piece of steel that was square if I wanted to make this, and then cutting this part out of a square piece of metal or a square piece of wood, right? So instead of trying to draw the outside shape of it like that, I'm going to just draw something square. And I'm going to work with the square shape. Right, as kind of my guide. So more or less, it's square-ish, even though the final shape is nowhere near square. Right, and then what I can do is I can look at this and say, okay, well, if I was going to go to the metal shop or the wood shop and try to fabricate this, what would I do next? You see, I'd probably start chipping away at it. I'd probably start chipping out some of the corners, you know, cutting, or at least laying out where I'm going to cut it. Right, because the overall shape has got round stuff, but I'm trying to plan out where I want these cutouts. Right, and I got a notch on the side here. Right, so more or less, if I started off with a square piece, I could break it down into some simpler shapes, some rectangles and smaller squares. Right, and that gives me more or less the right proportions. We could also go in and then say, okay, well, how can I refine this? How can I make it more exact to what I want? Well, that's where we start adding things like round corners, right? Some tangent arcs, maybe. Thinking about if we're going to draw circles, where do they start? Where do they stop? And how you can sketch an arc or a circle that looks like an arc or circle. This section here where this hole is, right? We got a circle, and we got a circle, and we got a circle here, right? So I'm just adding some details as I go. Let's round it off over here. And then what we are going to wind up with is at the end, we have a pretty good idea of what we want. And I drew it kind of light so then I can go back and darken everything in so that it's easy to see. Right. All the work I've done up to this point, I've done it very lightly because I knew I was going to have to erase a bunch of it. Now I can go back in there and I can darken in with the elements I'm going to keep. Alright, and then I can even go in there and add those center marks that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And then these two circles line up with each other, so I'll give them a center mark too. And here is my technical sketch for a very complicated shape that started off as a big square, remember? And we went in there and just added one little level of detail at a time until we had the final shape that we were after.